The great crystal towers of Zephyria Prime stretched high into the purple sky where 3 moons hung like jewels in the darkness, and the most powerful beings in the galaxy gathered to discuss something they found very amusing. Ambassador Vexnari stood before the Galactic Council, with his 4 arms spread wide and his crystalline body catching the light from the chamber's energy cores as he displayed holographic images that made the assembled aliens laugh and point with whatever appendages they possessed. The images showed a small blue planet spinning slowly in space, and on its surface lived creatures that walked on 2 legs and had only 2 arms and seemed to spend most of their time fighting each other with metal sticks and explosive devices that created fire and smoke. The creatures had built crude cities from stone and metal, and they moved around in wheeled vehicles that burned ancient plant matter for power and left trails of poisonous gas in their wake. Ambassador Kethmore of the Void Syndicate clicked his 6 eyes in rapid succession, which was how his species showed great amusement, and he gestured toward the display with one of his tentacles. The creatures on the planet had discovered how to split atoms, but they used this knowledge to build weapons that could destroy their own cities, and they actually tested these weapons on their own world, which left areas of poisoned ground that would remain deadly for thousands of years. The council chamber filled with sounds that passed for laughter among 12 different species as they watched humans wage war with projectile weapons that fired small pieces of metal at high speed and vehicles that moved on tracks or wheels while shooting explosive shells at each other. Admiral Zilthak of the Star Dominion made a gesture with his clawed hands that indicated complete disbelief as he watched footage of human soldiers running across battlefields while other humans tried to kill them with various primitive methods. What made the aliens laugh even harder was that humans seemed to enjoy their violence, and they made entertainment from watching staged fights, and they told stories about heroes who killed their enemies in creative ways, and they even played games that simulated warfare. The species of the galaxy had moved beyond such barbaric impulses millions of years ago when they learned to resolve conflicts through advanced negotiation protocols and energy manipulation techniques that could disable opponents without permanent harm. Dr. Jake Morrison sat in his laboratory on Earth at 3 in the morning staring at readings on his computer screen that made no sense according to everything humans knew about physics and space. His coffee had gone cold hours ago, but he kept drinking it anyway because the numbers on his screen were more important than sleep or taste or comfort. Strange energy patterns had been appearing at the edge of the solar system for months, and they followed no natural laws that human science could explain. His colleague, Dr. Lisa Chen, walked into the lab carrying another cup of coffee and a stack of printed reports that contained more impossible data from telescopes and satellites and deep space monitoring equipment. She set the coffee next to Jake's keyboard and spread the reports across his desk, while pointing to specific measurements that showed something was actively scanning their planet from a position near Neptune's orbit. The energy signatures were unlike anything humans had ever detected, and they seemed to be analyzing Earth's electromagnetic spectrum and radio transmissions and even the thermal patterns of major cities. Whatever was creating these scans possessed technology that made human science look like children, playing with wooden blocks and stone tools. Back on Zephyria, the Galactic Council continued their discussion of the primitive Earth species with the same attention they might give to an interesting insect colony discovered on some remote world. The humans had not yet developed faster-than-light travel, and their most advanced spacecraft moved through space using chemical rockets that took months to reach their own planetary neighbors. Ambassador Vexnari activated another hologram that showed human space stations and satellites which looked like metal cans connected with thin tubes compared to the elegant energy constructs and living ships used by civilized species. The humans had managed to put a few individuals on their moon using a massive rocket system that required explosive fuel and created more pollution than some entire alien cities produced in a year. The council voted unanimously to implement standard quarantine protocols around the Sol system which would prevent the humans from spreading their violent nature to other parts of the galaxy while allowing the council to observe their development for scientific purposes. Force barriers would be placed at key points around the solar system that would prevent human spacecraft from leaving while remaining invisible to their primitive detection equipment. Dr. Morrison received a call from Colonel Amy Rodriguez at the Global Defense Initiative, who had been tracking the same energy signatures from military installations around the world. The patterns were definitely artificial, and they showed signs of intelligent design and active scanning, which meant that something was out there studying Earth with technology far beyond human capabilities. Meanwhile, Ambassador Kethmore suggested that the Council should establish monitoring stations throughout the human solar system to observe how primitive species naturally evolved or destroyed themselves. The Void Syndicate had extensive experience with observing developing civilizations, and they had learned that most primitive species either achieved technological transcendence or eliminated themselves through warfare within a few thousand years. The crystal spires of Zephyria Prime hummed with energy as the Council members prepared to return to their respective worlds to implement the quarantine and begin the observation phase of what they expected would be an entertaining study of primitive behavior. None of them considered that the violent creatures on the blue planet might possess qualities that civilized species had forgotten during their millions of years of peaceful evolution. Dr. Morrison saved his data and prepared to share his findings with Colonel Rodriguez and her military science teams, because the energy signature suggested that Earth was being watched by something that viewed humans as subjects in an experiment rather than equals worthy of contact or respect. 6 months passed after the Galactic Council made their decision, and alien monitoring stations began appearing throughout the solar system like silent metal flowers that bloomed in the darkness of space and watched everything that moved on or around the third planet from the sun. The stations used advanced cloaking technology that made them invisible to human detection equipment, but they recorded every radio transmission and tracked every satellite and analyzed every spacecraft that humans launched into their local space. Commander Ryan Blake stood on the bridge of the UES Defiant and watched the tactical display show a contact that appeared near Mars 3 days earlier and had been sitting motionless in space ever since. The object measured roughly 200 meters in length and had a smooth hull that reflected no light and generated no heat signature that human sensors could detect. Intelligence analysts on Earth believed it was some kind of probe or observation platform, but nobody knew where it came from or what it wanted. Blake ordered his navigator to plot an intercept course because the Global Defense Initiative had given him clear instructions to investigate any unknown objects in human space and determine their origin and intentions. His crew of 43 men and women prepared their ship's defensive systems and scientific equipment as they approached the alien vessel, which continued to ignore their presence completely. The probe belonged to the Crystalline Hegemony, and its commander was a junior officer named Zeltar, who had been assigned to monitor human space activities as part of his basic training in primitive species observation. The humans approaching in their crude metal ship registered on his sensors as barely more advanced than the chemical rockets they had used to reach their moon, and he classified them as non-threatening, according to standard protocols. Dr. Morrison worked with Colonel Rodriguez and her team of military scientists to analyze every piece of data they could gather about the mysterious object near Mars, and they discovered that it used energy fields and exotic matter that human science could not explain. The probe seemed to be scanning human spacecraft and installations with the same detached interest that human scientists might show when studying bacteria under a microscope. Commander Blake tried to establish communication with the alien vessel, using radio signals and light patterns and mathematical sequences, but received no response from the sleek craft that continued to float in space like a piece of advanced artwork. His weapons officer reported that their missiles and particle beams were armed and ready, but Blake wanted to try peaceful contact before resorting to violence. Officer Zeltar noted the human attempts at communication in his log and found them mildly interesting from an academic perspective, but saw no reason to respond since primitive species often made random noises when they encountered superior technology. His probe's defensive systems could easily destroy the approaching human ship if necessary, but the crystalline being expected, the humans would eventually give up and return to their planet. The moment that changed everything came when Blake realized that the alien vessel was treating his ship and crew like animals in a zoo that could be observed and ignored without consequence. He had served in 3 wars and commanded ships in combat against human enemies, and he understood that showing weakness to a superior force often resulted in complete destruction for those who backed down. Blake gave the order that shocked the galaxy and commanded his helmsman to ram the alien probe at maximum velocity, while ordering all crew members to brace for impact. The UES Defiant accelerated toward the crystalline vessel, while Blake activated the ship's self-destruct sequence, because he would rather die fighting than live as a specimen in some alien experiment. Officer Zeltar watched in complete disbelief as the human ship accelerated directly toward his probe, while broadcasting what his translation systems identified as war songs and battle cries. No civilized species would sacrifice an expensive spacecraft and trained crew members in such a pointless gesture, and the crystalline officer had no protocols for dealing with such irrational behavior. The collision destroyed both vessels in a brilliant explosion that lit up the space around Mars and sent debris flying in all directions, while emergency signals from the human ship transmitted final messages to Earth. The alien probe managed to send a data burst back to the crystalline hegemony before it was destroyed, and that transmission contained analysis of human behavior that confused and concerned the aliens. Dr. Morrison received the last transmission from Commander Blake's ship and realized that humans had just made first contact with an alien species by ramming one of their vessels and destroying it along with their own people. The wreckage that fell toward Mars contained fragments of technology that was millions of years more advanced than anything humans had ever seen, and those pieces would teach them things that would change the course of galactic history. Colonel Rodriguez coordinated the recovery mission that sent ships to collect every piece of alien debris they could find, and she established a new research facility where human scientists could study materials that seemed to bend the laws of physics. Dr. Ben Carter joined the team as their lead physicist, and he began analyzing crystalline fragments that contained more energy than nuclear reactors and responded to electromagnetic fields in ways that human science could not explain. The Galactic Council received Officer Zeltar's final report, and for the first time in millions of years they felt something that civilized species had forgotten how to experience. The primitive humans had not only detected their monitoring probe, but had destroyed it using the most barbaric method imaginable, and they had shown complete willingness to die rather than submit to observation. Ambassador Vexenari called an emergency session of the Council because the humans had demonstrated behavior that violated every principle of civilized conduct and suggested that these primitives might be more dangerous than anyone had imagined. The crystalline being recommended increased monitoring and possibly direct intervention to prevent the humans from developing more advanced weapons or spacecraft. Captain Steve Mitchell analyzed the tactical data from the destroyed probe and recognized that alien technology relied on predictable energy patterns and sophisticated defensive systems that assumed rational opponents who valued their own survival. Human warfare had taught them that desperate enemies often achieved victory through methods that civilized forces could not anticipate or counter effectively. Admiral Zilthak observed the human activities from his command ship, positioned in the outer reaches of the solar system, and what he saw made no sense according to everything the Star Dominion knew about primitive species development. The humans had launched dozens of crude spacecraft toward their outer planets using chemical propulsion systems that burned fossil fuels and created massive amounts of pollution, but they seemed to be establishing permanent installations on multiple worlds. The alien admiral watched through advanced sensors as humans built bases on Mars and Europa, and several asteroids using construction methods that appeared inefficient and wasteful compared to the energy manipulation techniques that civilized species employed. The humans transported materials using slow cargo ships and assembled their structures with mechanical tools and robotic systems that moved like metal insects across the surfaces of airless worlds. General Patricia Lewis coordinated the secret militarization of space from her command center, buried deep beneath the Colorado mountains, and she smiled when she read reports about alien confusion over human expansion activities. Every human outpost in space had been designed to look like a mining operation or scientific research station, but each facility contained weapon systems that could destroy spacecraft or bombard planetary targets with kinetic projectiles. Dr. Morrison worked with his expanded team of scientists and engineers to reverse engineer fragments from the destroyed alien probe, and they had made breakthrough discoveries that changed human understanding of physics and energy manipulation. The crystalline materials responded to specific electromagnetic frequencies and could store enormous amounts of power in configurations that human science had never imagined possible. Lieutenant Kelly Barnes specialized in cyber warfare and electronic intelligence gathering, and she had been working for months to crack the alien communication protocols that they had detected, emanating from the mysterious monitoring stations. Her breakthrough came when she realized that alien data transmissions used quantum entanglement principles that allowed instantaneous communication across vast distances. Marcus Thompson led a team of engineers who were developing kinetic bombardment systems that used alien energy principles to accelerate metal projectiles to incredible velocities, and these weapons could be disguised as mining equipment or construction tools until the moment they were needed to destroy enemy targets. The systems required no explosive warheads because the kinetic energy alone could penetrate any known armor or shielding. The Galactic Council received reports from monitoring stations throughout human space, and the information painted a picture of a species that was expanding faster than any primitive civilization should be capable of achieving. The humans had somehow developed new propulsion technologies and energy systems that allowed them to establish permanent presences on multiple worlds within their solar system. Ambassador Vexnari reviewed the data and noticed patterns that troubled his crystalline mind because the human expansion did not follow standard primitive development models. Most species remained confined to their homeworlds for centuries after achieving basic spaceflight, but humans were colonizing their entire solar system within a few years of their first contact with alien technology. Dr. Morrison achieved the breakthrough that would change everything when his team successfully intercepted and decoded a transmission between alien monitoring stations and discovered the locations of 12 different star systems that served as homeworlds for the species. Watching Earth. The communication contained detailed information about alien military capabilities and political structures and social organizations. Captain Steve Mitchell analyzed the intelligence data and realized that the alien civilizations had made a critical error in their assessment of human capabilities and intentions. The aliens possessed superior technology, but their military forces were designed for intimidation and control rather than actual warfare, and they had not fought a real war in thousands of years. Lieutenant Barnes expanded her cyber warfare operations and began infiltrating alien computer networks using techniques that combined human hacking methods with alien quantum communication principles. She discovered that alien societies were completely dependent on their advanced technology for basic functions like food production and transportation and environmental control. The aliens had eliminated warfare from their civilizations so completely that they had forgotten how to fight enemies who were willing to use any method necessary to achieve victory. Their conflicts were ritualized affairs with predetermined outcomes, and their weapons were designed to disable rather than destroy, and their military doctrine assumed that opponents would surrender when faced with overwhelming technological superiority. General Lewis received reports from intelligence analysts who had been studying alien society and culture, and she realized that human enemies had made themselves vulnerable by becoming too civilized and too dependent on their advanced systems. The aliens had never faced opponents who could turn their own technology against them, or who would target civilian infrastructure to achieve military objectives. Dr. Ben Carter worked with weapons designers to create new types of explosives and energy weapons that used alien principles, but were designed according to human military doctrine that emphasized maximum destruction rather than elegant solutions. Human weapons were crude and brutal compared to alien technology, but they were also more effective at killing enemies and destroying targets. The moment of decision came when Admiral Zielthak detected massive energy signatures from human facilities throughout the solar system and realized that the primitive species had somehow weaponized alien technology and were preparing for large-scale military operations. The Star Dominion Admiral sent urgent messages to the Galactic Council, warning that the humans represented a genuine threat to galactic civilization. Ambassador Kethmore dismissed the warnings because primitive species could not possibly threaten civilizations that had mastered energy manipulation and faster than light travel and controlled resources from thousands of star systems. The Void Syndicate had observed the development of countless species, and none had ever posed a threat to established galactic powers. But the aliens had made a fundamental error in their understanding of human nature because they measured primitiveness by technological development rather than by capacity for violence and adaptation. Humans had never stopped being predators and warriors and survivors, and they had spent their entire history learning how to kill enemies who possessed superior weapons and technology. Colonel Rodriguez was promoted to Supreme Allied Commander and given authority over all human military forces as Earth prepared for the first interstellar war in galactic history. She understood that humans had only one chance to strike before the aliens realized their mistake and brought overwhelming force against the primitive species that had dared to threaten their ancient civilizations. The galaxy was about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous enemies are those who have nothing left to lose and everything to gain from victory. The first strike came without any warning or declaration of war, and appeared to be nothing more than a small human exploration vessel that had somehow managed to travel faster than light, using technology that should have been impossible for primitive species to develop. Ambassador Vexnari watched from his luxury complex on Christos as the approaching ship registered on planetary defense sensors and automatically classified as non-threatening due to its small size and apparent lack of weapons. What the crystalline being did not know was that the approaching vessel contained no living crew members and was actually a kinetic kill weapon that had been accelerated to 15% of light speed using alien energy principles that human engineers had modified for maximum destructive potential. The weapon had been launched from the outer edge of human space and had traveled for months through hyperspace using navigation data stolen from alien communication networks. Dr. Morrison monitored the weapon's approach from his command center on Earth and felt a mixture of anticipation and dread as humanity prepared to announce its presence to the galaxy in the most violent way possible. The kinetic projectile contained no explosive warheads or exotic weapons because it did not need them when traveling at such incredible velocity and carrying enough mass to crack planetary crusts. The impact on Christos created an explosion that could be seen from neighboring star systems as the crystalline cities that had stood for millions of years were instantly vaporized, along with most of the planet's surface. The shockwave traveled through the planet's core and shattered crystalline formations that had taken geological ages to form, while the energy release sterilized everything within 1,000 kilometers of ground zero. Ambassador Vexenari died along with 90% of his species' population in the first few seconds of human interstellar warfare, and the survivors scattered throughout crystalline space could not understand what had happened to their invincible homeworld. The hegemony's advanced warning systems and planetary shields had been completely useless against a weapon that relied on simple mass and velocity rather than exotic energy manipulation. Before the other alien civilizations could react to the destruction of Christos, the second wave of human attacks began targeting military installations throughout Void Syndicate space, using similar kinetic weapons that had been launched simultaneously from hidden facilities in the human solar system. Ambassador Kethmore watched his species' great battle stations disappear in brilliant flashes of light as human weapons struck with the precision of surgical instruments and the power of stellar explosions. Admiral Sarah Knox commanded the human battle fleet from her flagship UES Retribution as her ships emerged from hyperspace in coordinated formations that confused alien defenders who expected primitive species to use simple tactics and predictable strategies. The human vessels had been built using reverse-engineered alien technology, but every system had been redesigned to maximize combat effectiveness rather than elegance or efficiency. The aliens discovered that their greatest weakness was their dependence on centralized command structures and automated defense systems that could be disrupted by enemies who understood electronic warfare and cyber attacks. Lieutenant Barnes had spent months infiltrating alien networks, and she activated computer viruses that turned defensive systems against their own installations while jamming communication networks throughout multiple star systems. Admiral Zilthak tried to organize a coordinated response from his command ship, but found that human hackers had taken control of Star Dominion communication relays and were broadcasting false orders and contradictory information that sent alien fleets to wrong locations while human forces struck undefended targets. The Star Dominion's advanced artificial intelligence systems became weapons against their own creators when human programmers introduced logic viruses that caused massive system failures. Dr. Carter had weaponized alien nanotechnology by creating self-replicating machines that could distinguish between alien materials and human-manufactured substances, and the microscopic weapons spread through alien ships and stations like a technological plague that consumed hull plating and electronic components while leaving human equipment completely untouched. Entire fleets dissolved as their vessels lost structural integrity, and their crews were exposed to the vacuum of space. General Lewis coordinated simultaneous attacks on infrastructure targets throughout 12 star systems, as human forces demonstrated that primitive species could be far more ruthless than civilized enemies, who followed rules of engagement and tried to minimize casualties. Human weapons targeted power generation facilities and food production centers and transportation networks, because destroying these systems would cripple entire civilizations within days. The Galactic Council tried to convene an emergency session to coordinate their response, but discovered that human forces had already captured or destroyed their primary meeting facilities and communication networks. The council members found themselves isolated in their respective territories, while human fleets moved through space like wolves hunting scattered prey. Captain Mitchell led bomber squadrons that targeted alien population centers using weapons that combined human biological warfare techniques with alien genetic engineering principles. The biological agents were designed to affect only alien species while remaining harmless to humans, and they spread through alien worlds like wildfire that consumed everything in its path, while leaving empty cities and abandoned installations. The psychological impact of human warfare tactics was as devastating as the physical destruction, because alien species had forgotten what it meant to face enemies who fought without mercy or restraint. The humans did not attempt to capture territory or negotiate surrender terms, but instead focused on complete elimination of their opponent's ability to wage war or even survive as organized civilizations. Colonel Rodriguez realized that human forces were winning not because they possessed superior technology, but because they understood warfare at a fundamental level that civilized species had forgotten during their millions of years of peace and prosperity. The aliens had made war into an art form, while humans had kept it as a brutal science focused on killing enemies and breaking things. The Harmonic Collective tried to negotiate a ceasefire by offering human forces access to advanced technology and territorial concessions. But Rodriguez ignored all communication attempts because she understood that aliens who viewed humans as primitive animals would never honor any agreement once they recovered from their initial surprise and reorganized their forces. Dr. Morrison watched tactical displays that showed the collapse of alien civilization after alien civilization, as human forces methodically destroyed everything that made their enemies powerful and advanced. The aliens had built societies that were marvels of engineering and art, but they had also created vulnerabilities that primitive warriors could exploit with devastating effectiveness. Within 18 months, 11 of the 12 alien civilizations had been reduced to scattered survivors, hiding in remote locations while their homeworlds burned and their great achievements crumbled into radioactive dust. The galaxy learned that advanced technology meant nothing when wielded by species who had forgotten how to fight for their survival against enemies who had never stopped being predators. The Harmonic Collective was the last alien civilization still capable of organized resistance after 2 years of total war that had reduced 11 advanced species to scattered refugees hiding in asteroid fields and abandoned space stations while their homeworlds cooled into lifeless rocks. Prime resonance. Kelvane had watched the systematic destruction of galactic civilization from his hidden command ship and realized that his species faced complete extinction unless they could convince the humans to accept surrender. The crystalline, being activated a quantum communication array and transmitted a holographic message toward Earth, while his surviving ships prepared for one final attempt at negotiation. The message traveled faster than light through dimensions that human science was only beginning to understand, and reached President Claire Watson as she met with the Global Defense Council in the rebuilt Pentagon facility that now served as humanity's center for interstellar warfare coordination. Kelvane's hologram flickered into existence in the council chamber, and his usually harmonious voice carried undertones of something that humans had learned to recognize as alien fear. His species communicated through musical frequencies and light patterns, but the translation systems converted his desperate plea into words that the human leaders could understand, even as they prepared to eliminate the last organized alien resistance. Dr. Morrison sat at the council table as Earth's chief advisor on alien technology, and he studied Kelvain's energy patterns while the alien leader spoke about miscalculation and underestimation, and the terrible price that advanced civilizations had paid for treating primitive species as subjects for scientific observation, rather than potential equals worthy of respect and caution. The Prime Resonance admitted that the Galactic Council had made fundamental errors in their assessment of human capabilities and intentions because they had measured primitiveness according to technological development rather than capacity for innovation and adaptation under pressure. The aliens had possessed superior tools and knowledge, but they had forgotten the most important lessons about survival and warfare that primitive species learned through constant struggle. President Watson listened to the alien surrender offer, while tactical displays showed the locations of remaining harmonic collective installations scattered throughout the galaxy, and she realized that humanity had achieved something that no species in galactic history had ever accomplished. Human forces had defeated 12 advanced civilizations using modified alien technology, combined with primitive tactics that civilized enemies could not anticipate or counter effectively. Admiral Knox reported from her flagship that human fleets had completed the encirclement of the last alien strongholds and were prepared to eliminate all remaining resistance within 72 hours, using weapons that would crack planets and sterilize entire star systems. The human military had perfected the art of total destruction and possessed sufficient firepower to eliminate every trace of alien civilization from the galaxy. Dr. Carter presented analysis of captured alien technology that revealed the fundamental weakness of civilized species who had evolved beyond the need for warfare and violence. The aliens had created magnificent societies built on principles of harmony and cooperation, but they had also eliminated the brutal innovation that came from facing enemies who wanted to kill them and take everything they possessed. Colonel Rodriguez explained humanity's strategic philosophy to the alien leader, and her words carried the weight of 2 years of successful combat operations against opponents who had initially possessed overwhelming technological advantages. Human warfare doctrine emphasized maximum destruction of enemy capabilities, combined with psychological operations designed to break the will of opponents who might otherwise regroup and attempt revenge. The surrender terms were simple and non-negotiable because human leaders understood that any agreement with aliens who had viewed them as primitive animals would only provide time for the enemy to develop new weapons and strategies. The surviving alien species would withdraw beyond the galactic rim to regions of space that humans had designated as forbidden zones, and they would never return to threaten Earth or interfere with human expansion. Kelvain accepted the terms because the alternative was complete extinction for his species and the handful of other alien survivors who had managed to escape the systematic destruction of their civilizations. The Harmonic Collective would abandon their ancient territories and magnificent cities to become nomads wandering through empty space, while humans claimed the galaxy that had once belonged to advanced species. Captain Mitchell coordinated the withdrawal operations that allowed alien survivors to gather their remaining population and flee toward the edge of known space, while human forces established patrol zones to ensure that no alien technology or personnel remained in territories that now belonged to primitive Earth species. The humans had learned from history that enemies who were allowed to escape often returned with superior weapons and renewed determination. Dr. Morrison reflected on the irony of humanity's victory as he watched alien refugees loading their possessions onto the few remaining ships of species that had once controlled thousands of star systems. The aliens had quarantined Earth to prevent primitive violence from spreading to civilized space, but their isolation had given humans time to study alien technology and prepare for interstellar warfare. The galaxy had changed forever because a species that measured advancement by capacity for harmony and cooperation had encountered opponents who measured success by ability to kill enemies and break their possessions. The aliens had created beautiful civilizations that represented millions of years of cultural and technological development, but they had also made themselves vulnerable to enemies who retained the killer instincts that evolution had programmed into successful predators. President Watson addressed the human population from the steps of the rebuilt White House and announced that Earth had achieved total victory in humanity's first interstellar war against alien civilizations that had vastly superior technology and resources. The primitive species had defeated advanced enemies by using their own tools against them, while applying tactical principles that civilized opponents had forgotten during their long ages of peace. Human colonies began expanding throughout the galaxy as construction fleets converted alien installations into human facilities, while archaeological teams studied the ruins of civilizations that had created wonders of engineering and art before they encountered a species that viewed war as the ultimate form of problem-solving. The galaxy belonged to humans because they had never forgotten that survival required the willingness to kill anything that threatened their existence. The age of human expansion spread across star systems that had once been controlled by species who laughed at primitive Earth and dismissed its violent inhabitants as backward savages unworthy of respect or consideration. Those aliens had learned too late that sometimes being primitive meant possessing advantages that advanced civilizations had evolved away from during their journey toward technological transcendence. In the ruins of 12 great civilizations, the galaxy remembered a lesson that would echo through space for millions of years, and that lesson was simple and brutal, and absolutely true. Never underestimate a species that learned to dominate their world by making war into an art form, because primitive predators with advanced weapons become the most dangerous force that any universe can contain.